what we're aiming for and talk about that again, but maybe we'll just open it up to any thoughts or comments or questions. Rodney?
So this is to talk about what we're going to recommend on roads.
Yeah.
So do we have a list of all the requests that we're considering?
Yeah, so we're, last week, we've all collectively started putting together a list. Laura now has it. She passed it on to me and I tried to get it into an Excel. It's not quite ready for prime time, I would say, but there is a list and we can sort of walk through it. I think I'll, because it's not ready for prime time, I don't think I'm going to say here, pass it out, but it has everything that we talked about last week. It may be difficult to have a conversation, I realize, without sort of looking at the list.
Is there anything, just bullet points?
Yeah, I don't even have that. But we have the requests from the agencies, which are $10 million that we just talked about. Essentially $2 million plus $3 million for working lands on top of a base of $1 million. We've got the Forest Parks and Recreation. We've got 10 million from the Commerce Agency also, which we're not the only committee who's looking at that. And then we have $500,000 that was not in the budget for the local purchase incentive, which I'm feeling that's probably going to be at or near the top of what we want to request for funding. And then there are the various other organizations that have asked for one-time funding or in some cases an additional increase. And then there's the Housing and Conservation Board, which statutorily gets a certain percentage of the property transfer tax, but is historically not funded. Yep. And I know you had raised that point.
That one off the board.
We might want to recommend that for what it's worth, that we think that program, that money should go where it's intended. There's the Housing and Conservation Board gets and is getting, right now, one-time funding for housing, but its conservation programs are not, I believe, benefiting from that. So.
Where does the Land Access Opportunity Board come in with our funding? Because I'm looking at in our other documents for the tax stuff, and I don't see it here. And so I'm just wondering, where does that figure in? Because they're doing a lot with obviously farmland and farming and.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember too, if there is a specific dollar amount requested.
They wanted 1.4 million a year and they wanted it for 4 years. So they'd be able to actually settle in and plan rather than, begging for their supper every year.
Yeah. Okay. So not sure if we have the document posted.
Okay.
So we'll look for that. Yep. Laura, I don't know if you can look for that while we're chatting, but the land access.
David, just procedurally,
Yeah.
to whatever collective recommendations we make, does this then go to Ways and Means?
Appropriations. Yeah. And they will certainly
consider our.
Yeah. And if there's something that we don't recommend, it's less likely that it will be funded. Appropriations we'll be hearing from a lot of the same folks who come in here. I think Forest Parks and Recreation said that they have also recently visited appropriations. So they're hearing many of the same things, but not necessarily all of them. I guess I'd be curious to hear from anybody in the committee who has a particularly strong feeling about any particular request that we've gotten.
Sorry for laughing.
John?
That a yes?
Yeah, we got a lot of strong feelings.
Representative O'Brien, did you want to say something? You're just turning on your camera.
No, I just, before we got into strong likes or not so interested requests, I got in touch with Betsy Rosenbluth, and she said that that 500,000 for the local food incentive was a line item in the Agency of Education, not Ag. So, and bizarrely, nobody really knows why it was left off, but whether that affects our recommend to approps, I don't know if we can recommend sort of outside our jurisdiction. Certainly is germane to what we work on here, but we don't usually recommend budget to Agency of Education. And similarly, the 29 million, I was wondering, for universal school meals, it would come out of the Ed Fund, but would that also be a Agency of Education budget item?
Yes, it would. And I think so procedurally, we can flag that we realize it's outside of our normal jurisdiction and or consult with the House Education Committee and say, here's what we're doing. We don't want to step on your toes, supersede your authority. I don't think there'll be an issue there, but just certainly flagging that it's different agency. Yeah, I think makes sense. It's also.
I wonder, if we could ask the Agency of Ag if they would recommend that, or if they stay away from those sort of interagency recommends.
I'm not sure. Representative Graham.
Anytime you ask the agency, they respond, we support the budgets recommend, the governor's recommend.
That's probably true. So if it was an oversight, even if it were an oversight, I think that would be the response. So.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we could also get in somebody maybe from the Agency of Education and ask them, if they would like to see it back in.
I think Representative Graham is correct, though, that they wouldn't be. I mean, there's been plenty of opportunity, and nobody has come out and said that. But we could certainly put the question more directly and see what they're saying. I mean, I think either way, our position is, well, I don't want to speak to the committee without asking, but I feel like our committee's position is going to be, fund that. Based on the conversations that are overheard over the last few weeks.
Fund the
$500,000 for the local purchasing.
And Chair, one more quick question. When the Agency of Ag says, it's our turn, our 10 million here, does the governor's, the administrative, executive branch, do they look at budget forecasts and say we have this much money in the general fund, so you're the agency this year that's going to get that 10 million as opposed to one of the other agencies? Or is it more like, hey, we have a really good idea and now you General Assembly come up with some money?
I think that the sort of stepping back and looking at the big picture, there's a revenue forecast, consensus forecast that the administration and the legislature both, sign off on essentially and say, we agree that's the number that we'll budget to. And so the governor's starting from that point. And some of it is one-time funding. Obviously this year, a lot of it is one-time funding through federal programs, all the programs that we're familiar with. And we're not I don't think there's a, a disagreement. There wouldn't be a sort of decision to make about that. The decision really is, do we want to use the funds that we agree on, the dollar amounts for this purpose or for another purpose? And that's just not our committee making that decision. And we might say, we think Working Lands, we like the program. Let's change that dollar. Let's increase that dollar amount, and maybe we'll take it from something else, purely hypothetically. Appropriations is looking at the larger picture, and they might say, we like Working Lands so much that we're going to take money from some other program in another part of government. So that's sort of they're really looking at the entire picture, and they've got to come up with a number that matches the total in the budget. We have a little more flexibility. We can say, the numbers that we've been shown are good, but we really think there's some important programs. We hope that you appropriations will fund them, and we understand that funding would have to come from somewhere else, but we think they're important. And understanding that all the committees are probably thinking and would be making that same argument.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting if it sounds like that 10 million is out there though. So potentially our committee could say, we actually like all the other asks that we've heard and we know there's money for it. I mean, I know appropriations may disagree, but, and move those forward. I mean, usually it's a question of there's no money out there, so don't even ask for anything.
That's certainly, historically, this is not the way this week usually, is unfolding. Yeah. All right, so back to
your big question.
Yeah, or John, while you have the floor, did you, anything else that you wanted to say, or any particular programs that you want to speak up for?
I just would have to look at the list maybe and prioritize them. I mean, like the local food incentive would be, since it's already been funded, we've heard of success. I would definitely keep that going.
Yep. Okay.
So I'm kind of, with the $10 million thing, I'm having a little bit of a hard time with it being so loosey-goosey. And then we're just kind of like, here's the rough idea. And then we're supposed to go yes or no. It doesn't feel like a developed program. And they admitted that it wasn't. And then in general, just, the whole, I don't want to all the people who have been here have been amazing, highly intelligent, very, but the agency in general feels like the Winchester Mystery House. I mean, there's a new program, it's an addition built onto the side, and it seems convoluted. And then, this weekend I was looking at an audit of the dairy industry in Vermont, and it's an incredible amount of money that we're pumping into this program that, has questionable environmental impacts, questionable economic impacts, is the farthest thing from resiliency. And I really do take our mandate very seriously. I mean, we are here to mitigate the negative effects that agriculture contributes to our carbon footprint. And the resiliency issue here is also very, very important. And just in general, these seem to be sort of afterthoughts. Like they're throwing us a bone with this $1 million payment for ecosystem services thing. And that's what they referred to when I brought this up, right? They're like, oh, but we did this for you. And it's like, what's their total budget? It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and they've put forward $1 million program for payment ecosystem services. I mean, it feels like they aren't on the same page as we are as far as like what we're supposed to be doing here, or maybe not on the same page with me. I don't want to speak for everybody else, but Yeah, I'm really concerned. I'm concerned about Vermont. I'm concerned about agriculture. I'm concerned about our environment, the economy, and, you know, just having a program, an agency that just responds and reacts. There's a value to that flexibility too, and I'm not going to dismiss that totally, but there doesn't seem to be a real direction, and I think we need to make a direction. You know, like somebody does if it's not us.
But they have a direction. They
Well,
just don't have a plan yet, but they know where they want to go.
Right.
But they can't implement the plan until they get the money.
I mean, in general, the entire agency and all this.
Oh.
I mean, I
I'm
got
just focusing on what's here.
yeah, I got this. This is all of the different grant programs available to farmers in Vermont, and it's thick. And it's disjointed and it's a million different things and it's hundreds of millions of dollars in every direction. And I met with somebody on Monday from the NRCD. And, you know, a lot of those people on their off hours work as private contractors to help farmers get through this stuff. Like, it's so complicated and so inaccessible to the average farmer that you know, these government workers, in fact, have to, on their off hours, you know, whether for payment or for free, help these farmers through, you know, all of this convoluted, and some of these programs are great, some of them not so great.
This isn't just the Agency of Ag though. This is a lot.
It's everything.
It's all the agencies that fund anything.
And a lot of the agencies get their funding through agriculture as well. So, I mean, it may not necessarily all be ag.
so yeah, I just want to rein this in a little bit here, but,
Yeah.
and I think we got another question or an observation. I'll just say that we can take a proposal like what we've seen that, I mean, I think the agency concedes is still, it has not been fully fleshed out. And we can, in our response to that, it doesn't have to necessarily be tomorrow, probably can't be tomorrow, but we can say, you know, we like the general idea. We want to put some guardrails around it, and you know, here's what we're thinking. So we, you know, in fairness, I think that the administration, the agency, they're doing what they've been, you know.
No, they're good people.
Have given them, well, yes, right.
Yeah,
That,
I get it.
also, they're working within the sort of boundaries that the legislature has, you know, up to now, certainly, you know, given them to work with. So we, you know, our committee does have a new expanded jurisdiction, and we can work going forward to make changes in various ways. But and I think one way we can do that is through looking at this proposal and saying, okay, well, how would that work for us, us as a committee?
Thank you. And to dovetail off of a portion of what you said, I think that booklet right there is a phenomenal resource for farmers. However, the fact is they do have an exceptionally challenging time navigating that. And I think that if we are going to consider somewhere where our money could have a really important impact, it would be funding the conservation districts who have taken the time to do that work and are working to address climate mitigation, are working to assist farmers in accessing all of the grant opportunities that exist for them. So I think that would be a really wonderful way to ensure that farmers have as much support as they can, considering that the agency seems to be a little bit strapped in that.
Yeah.
So using our additional advocates and folks available in that realm. And then something that you had mentioned, Chair, that I might have missed in their response was Maple included? Was Maple included in the original ask for the $10 million for producers? And my concern of that being that Maple is a wonderful industry and isn't perhaps struggling to the same respect that, say, vegetable producers or meat producers are, and equally is a massive economic generator for the state of Vermont. And I would just be concerned that the volume at which they would be applying for the grant would supersede those folks who might have a little bit more impact when it comes to a resilient food system that we would like to be encouraging. And when we are considering these local food incentive purchases and the amount of money that schools put out for food, it's like $16 million annually. And I just think that perhaps we should be investing in the areas that would develop a more robust agricultural food system outside of commodities.
Yeah, agreed.
And I view maple to be the next commodity that we could really be investing in, which I think would be a real missed opportunity when we think about diversity within our ag system.
And it's a monocrop.
Right.
It's not diverse. It's just maple trees everywhere.
Right. And I love pancakes, but
A
I
lot.
think that it would be an important thing to consider.
The point was made, and I'm the one who brought this up, but I will also say that the point was made that the reverse osmosis machines do make, have an impact on, environmental impact.
Well, they mitigate it.
Maybe it's addressing a different problem than the overall structure of the program may be setting out to do. I'm not sure.
So dairy generates 2.2 billion annually, and that's 3 million daily in cash infusion in the state. Not included in that 10 million at all. Produce produces 50 million in annual sales, and there are more than 1,000 producers.
What are you reading from there, Representative?
I'm reading.
Just for our audience.
Pardon me, I'm reading from the Vermont Agriculture and Food System Strategic Plan, Farm to Plate. I borrowed this from Representative Graham's desk.
You should have them.
I do.
They get you on.
So this is a good source, and then there's beef and other. Let's talk about meat slaughter processing, steak.
What's your point of reading the numbers though? I'm curious to know. Well, like 2.2 billion for dairy and like what's the point?
Point is, it's a big part of the agricultural economy. Other points, I'll highlight the counties. From 09 to 19, they have lost 35% of their dairy farms. Another big county, Caledonia, has lost 33%. Franklin County has lost 44%. Lamoille has lost 39%. Orange has lost 35%.
So are you advocating then for the funding to go to meat?
Well, I'm just saying, we're not even focusing on dairy. But
This doesn't really.
I guess I'm making that point that it struck me that they were focused on meat processing. They were focusing on produce. And then maple. Maple's but those first two that they were focusing on are areas that I felt our committee, particularly on the, farm to school, farm to table, fresh and nutritious, they click those boxes, and to hospitals and other institutions from a carbon and a transport point of view. Those are important initiatives. I don't quite know how I feel about the maple.
Representative Graham.
So
Thank you.
if you go back from the start of this, okay, the governor appointed a task force to do a study on agriculture sectors that were not able to receive grant money through the current program they have. And the task force came up with these three sectors were not able to access grants from the existing program. So that's why $10 million was put in his budget to target some grants for these three sectors that they've been left out. That's the whole purpose of what was done.
I think I understand all of that. I mean, you're looking at me, so I feel like you're directing it.
I'm
Yeah.
talking to the whole committee.
Okay.
Whoever's up there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where this is coming from. So obviously the task force thinks that, and the whole object is to try to keep agricultural land, and whether it's through vegetables, maple, or meat, try to offset, the loss of small dairy farms, be able to keep the farm in production.
And I think so a couple of thoughts. I think that most of what's in the commission's recommendations are grounded somewhat in the farm to plate report. They're not like entirely, they don't diverge greatly anyway from what's there. There's much more in there, but the commission, which I'll also say sort of as an aside, it was the governor's commission, not a legislative commission, it was the governor's commission, but it's not a big departure from some of the things in the farm to plate. And they have other recommendations as well, all with some of them with large dollar amounts attached. So the administration then sort of synthesized what was in the commission's work, and they've been doing their work with put out several reports over the past few years and updates. So here's what we want to highlight on this year. And to the question earlier that you raised, Dave, about this is the year, this is our year. Well, I mean it's an unprecedented amount of money. There won't be one-time funding available, maybe ever again. I think that's the point. And to the extent that it's recommendation from the governor that makes a difference, having it in there, I think, as a sort of a starting point. Another year, we might all say, oh, yeah, we want to put $10 million in. It'll seem, I think, harder to make that work, or, not 10, but any other number.
Can I just put that into perspective, though, as far as the big picture here? I believe, I'm not quite sure what the agency's total budget is in terms of dollar amounts. Maybe somebody can throw that out there. But in this audit report I read from 2019 this weekend, the dairy industry receives about $381 million from just state agencies alone. And grant programs and tax incentives and all added up, it's a huge amount of money for an industry that struggles to be economically viable. I mean, it is a $2.2 billion industry, but it wouldn't be that without the support structure underneath it. On its own, it could not stand in this modern climate. So I'm looking at, a $1 million thing here and a $10 million thing here. You're right. It's a start, and it could be something bigger later. And we do need to be pragmatic, but if we pull back the camera lens a little bit and look at the big picture, we're looking at a broken system. And somebody has to say that. I mean, our Vermont agricultural system is broken, and resiliency is not just about, soil or economics. It's about the social impact as well that I see in my community, where people have been separated from the land because their farms have not worked out economically. And the the destruction to the community is beyond measure. You know, when you take the farmer off their historical land, it's the family never recovers from that. I mean, you know, addiction, drugs, I mean, all poverty, all those things start to, you know, come to the surface. And a lot of this has come out of pumping just tons and tons of money at something that isn't working. And so, you know, this $10 million can be something great, and we can put guardrails on the side, and this $1 million over here for Payment Free Ecosystem Services, it's a friendly bone, but I just want to remind everybody how damaged this whole system is. And I don't think it's enough. You know, I just, what I'm hearing isn't enough. It's all disjointed. It's a little bit here, it's a little bit there. It's sort of like our personality split into 1,000 pieces, saying yes to everyone, but not able to do one thing right. We're just sort of like, I'd love to see a comprehensive, unified goal as a state, as a government that can, you know, like, maybe just take this and put it in the shredder and start from scratch and really, you know, I mean, that's a fantasy, of course, but.
Well, I think, and tell me if I'm capturing what you're saying accurately, but it's nice to have these recommendations, but they're, in the grand scheme of things, the amount of money that perhaps the state is putting towards dairy that we're not even talking about here today, sort of dwarfs anything that we might be doing around the edges. Is that?
Yeah, that's part of what I'm saying, and maybe better said than I did.
Well, I think I missed some of the nuance, but in the context of budgeting anyway, and I'm thinking that we might want to dig into that and won't be able to, obviously, before we need to make some decisions and pass those decisions along. But you mentioned, I'm not sure the source of your numbers is what I'm thinking, but the auditor at one point did a report. We might want to ask the auditor to come in and walk us through that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that would help us, you know, think over the next year, so that when we're sitting in a year from now, you know, maybe it's a different kind of conversation. I think some of that dollar amount, probably current use tax.
Yes.
You know, exactly. So bear that in mind, and reasons for that.
Oh, I was just gonna, Vermont has spent 2019, $35 million.
So that's not the full audit, though. And I've looked at this number, and this was the number I was working with for a very long
You have to
time.
remember though, it's from 2019, so everything changed with COVID.
Not that much. So when you look at everything, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Define everything though, because not all of it's state funded.
I know, like, for example, current use.
Right, but that's not state, that's not a budget thing that we're looking at.
I understand, but I'm
So you
looking at
can't-
it. I'm looking at everything, though. I'm pulling back the camera. That's
Right,
what I'm
but
saying.
right now we're actually dialing into the spreadsheet. We're not pulling back. So
Yeah,
I think we need
but
to
I'm
look
pulling
at-
back in what I'm saying.
Yeah. So good sort of context for the conversation we're having now doesn't seem to be allowing for the way that you're presenting it, David. I think it's a good point to be raising. But given where we are, what we need to do, Representative Graham, did you have your hand up?
I was just gonna say, you know, what you're talking about, it's gonna take years,
Yeah.
but we don't have. And I understand, you know, I've been pushing this issue for the last few years that small dairies are ought to be pushed out.
Yeah.
But we have the opportunity to grow a lot of other things, produce a lot of other stuff. And I see this 10 million as the starting point, and then the 205 too, but to try to get these farms that aren't surviving dairy to use their land for something else. And because this 10 million does not go to dairy, at all.
So to diversify.
That's, a sign that even the governor is starting to figure out.
Yeah. Good point.
Large farms can make all the milk we need. Let them have it. Let's start producing vegetables and beef and other stuff that we need. I mean, grain, whatever else. Kind of the way I see
So,
There was so conservation districts, just since the comment was made earlier, anybody have thoughts on funding conservation districts? I think the request, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, was 3 million.
3 million.
And I believe that historically there hasn't been a lot of, maybe any general fund money going into conservation.
100% of what they get is from grants. But they are a statutory agency of the state without a proper source of funding.
And well, anything else to mention there?
Well, yeah, so they want 3 million, but their like base ask is 1.2 something or 1.3 something. I think at minimum they should be getting that, but 3 would be really great.
Okay. So I think, Representative O'Brien.
Does anybody on the committee remember what I think they had a one-time ask, or maybe it was even a base request last year that was funded? I mean, it was, I think maybe just for operating expenses. It wasn't really gonna, solve their underfunded history, but it was something like 352,000. I can't remember, but we should probably find what that was too.
Sounds familiar. Yeah. Okay, we'll check that out.
Okay.
Representative Lipsky.
I'm just reading a letter to Chairman Durfee, and I guess all of our committee, and this was really from Teresa Snow of Salvation Farms, who has this gleaning program that distributes to some institutions and prisons and stuff. Did she have a specific ask, or did they have a specific ask? And is that included in any of our, as you say, a bullet points or line items?
Their request was for $500,000 for Salvation Farms. And she testified as well over Zoom.
Yes.
You can have to go maybe, yeah.
Whether it's relevant, she had reached out to me by telephone over the weekend, and I'd gotten a notice from the governor's office from Kendall Smith that they were going to go around to Grand Isle County this weekend. In 3 weeks. They're going to Lamoille County 3 weeks from yesterday. And I reached out to Teresa Snow
that's all about what they did yesterday was all ARPA.
Yeah, ARPA.
Yeah.
But there's a project and a piece of property that needs renovation that would give them space, or they would be a part of it in Johnson, and sort of co-op with Jenna's Promise. And I said, she should certainly be welcome to that meeting at the Green Mountain Tech Center. It may be an avenue for her, and that's a pure grant program.
So I'll just go through the list, and again, this is really reciting what we had come up with the other day, but just to close and if there's any gaps here. Local purchasing incentive, 500,000, not in the budget. H205 has a $250,000 unbudgeted request. Working Lands budget is, the request in the budget is for $1 million, plus 3 million in one time. And the request from outside of the administration has been 4 million in base funding. Farm to school, $500,000. Land access, I'm not sure. We talked about that earlier. Housing and Conservation Board would like to see the statutory amount of money. The farm and fairs and field days, we've taken some testimony on that. $200,000 request in the budget. Jenna's Fairleigh Salvation Farms, 500,000. We just mentioned conservation districts. We just mentioned.
What about the food bank?
Yeah, so the food bank, the Human Services is making the recommendation there. It was 3 million. The Sustainable Jobs Fund has requested an increase in its base funding from $100,000 to $200,000. They had a grant source go out of business, so they're looking to fill that gap. And then they also had one-time funding request of $400,000. 3 different programs, I think, that Ellen walked us through. And then the other items all came through administration. So I think current use, the digitization is 1.75 million. The rural industry and development, $10 million. And then what we heard today from Forest Parks and Recreation, that totaled 2 million for those programs. What am I leaving out?
Serve, learn, earn.
Thank you. Serve, learn, earn. Yes. Yep. And I now actually want to, there's a,
Serve one.
so that falls under workforce development possibly, and there's a workforce development bill that we might want to try and get that. That's 2.5 million is the number that I have. And I will talk to Commerce about that.
What was the Rights and Democracy ask?
Land access opportunity.
Yeah, that was the Land Access Opportunity Board.
1.2 for 1 year, and then they'd like funding for 4.
Okay.
Will we be able to get like a spreadsheet of all of this?
And what's the total at the bottom?
Because I keep looking at the other documents. We have that
Yeah.
one thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to have all of these things on there.
Yeah, so yes, we will have tomorrow. all-
Okay. Cool.
Do we have to make this?
Well, nominally tomorrow. Yeah. If we needed more time, we could ask for more time.
For the clarity on the conservation districts, there was $250,000 that was added, which brought us to a total of 362 for that. And then their request is just the $3 million base funding as a line item.
Okay. Oops, sorry.
For uniformity.
I know that Alora's been very diligent about posting documents that come in. I know I've gotten a couple of emails today, and I'm not sure if you were copied on them, Alora, but we'll double check it. So people have written in saying, here's our testimony on the budget requests. We'll try to get everything up there so that everybody in the committee sees those communications. Is there anybody who the committee would like to hear from, get more information on any of these requests? If it suddenly comes to you later this afternoon or this evening, that I really would like more information about that, let me know and we can see what we can do. I mean, I think the challenge, whether we send something in tomorrow or Friday or, you know, the end of March is, we've got, the requests exceed perhaps the amount of money that's out there in that big budget. But, we can certainly feel, free to say, here are programs that we feel are important, and ask the appropriations committee to consider them too. John?
Was there any appropriation request in the housekeeping bill? Were they all just technical changes?
I don't think there was anything in the housekeeping bill, except for the fairs and field days, which was a 200,000. Anything else?
And the fairs and field days have those two different ones, but one comes through institutions and corrections,
Yeah.
so that we don't have to worry about that.
We
That's their capital thing. That comes
Yeah.
through those guys. Got it.
institution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ours is just the stipend.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, check your email. So tomorrow's schedule, we're meeting at 9. And we will be on the floor at 1. So but we'll be on the floor at 1 tomorrow, which is a change. It's been mentioned a couple times. Depending on how late the floor goes, this will be going forward on Wednesdays and Thursdays, probably be like this, starting at 1. So going forward, depending on how late the floor goes, we'll come back to committee and work on whatever we have to work on that day. So tomorrow, unless it's, if it's 5 o'clock, we won't come back. Tomorrow, depending on where we are with the budget, we'll leave it open. But we'll make it clear before we break for the morning. But in any case, 9 o'clock here tomorrow morning, and then
9 o'clock Thursday morning also.
Thursday morning
back
also,
in it.
yeah. But yeah, check your email between now and then. Might want to look at the budget page again just to see what's been added to that as far as testimony goes, and try to get a list out so that everybody can sort of see everything in one place too. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you
Thank you.
tomorrow.